So great to be here with my friend Corey Clothier, the founder and head of Stantec GenerationAV, which I love that title. I love the branding you've chosen for it, GenerationAV, because it's going to be a new generation out there that are comfortable with AVs and think it's natural. So welcome, Corey.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Stantec is, of course, a very large professional services infrastructure design group, originally based, I guess it's still based in Canada, but is around the world. It's a big group. Yeah. So tell us what Stantec GenerationAV is. Why now? Why Stantec? What are you trying to do?
Good question, and I kind of have a big answer. So, a number of your folks, probably your readers and your members, if they're in the autonomous vehicle space, they probably know me. I've been doing this since 2009. Started with the U.S. military. I've led quite a number of pilots around the country, but also in the UK, and supported projects in Europe and Middle East. So, but I was doing it as an independent consultant. So I was doing it on a very micro scale, but I have this grand vision of having a part of my life's mission is to help accelerate the adoption of autonomous vehicles. So I kind of fell in love with this in the early 2009s when I was working at the military and really thinking about how it could save money, save resources, and ultimately save lives. So I was like, okay, this is it. I'm in love with the technology. I'm in love with the mission. I got to commit myself to this. But for the first 10 years, I was doing it at a pretty micro scale, essentially by myself or with small partnerships. And I worked on a couple of projects with Stantec, and we started kind of brainstorming. Could we take their model and my model and combine them and go macro and go global? So that was the intent. So we kicked it off. It's been just slightly over a year. We kind of started the project in the first quarter of 2020. And Stantec created this innovation group the first time. They hired a chief innovation officer, and then they have this process called IBOs, with innovation business opportunities. And we are the first one to go through this cycle and this process is GenerationAV. And so it was typical. We almost acted like an internal startup where we had to develop a business plan, get it approved, and then once it's approved, it's startup time. We have to hire our people, get started on product development, etc. So what our mission is at GenerationAV, I know that was a long setup, but our mission is essentially to accelerate the adoption and deployment of autonomous vehicles globally. And how we're doing that is in two different ways. One is we are building consulting services and the tools to facilitate consulting services. And then we are also creating strategic partnerships with people that we think are enablers of autonomous vehicles. Enablers could be, it could be a LiDAR company, it could be an actual autonomous vehicle company, it could be an operator, et cetera, et cetera. So those are kind of the two paths as we're going forward.
What is your, some could make the statement that, are you guys being premature about this? That, level 5 autonomy is, way out there. Why do we even have to care about this now? Why do municipalities have to care about this now? Why do we have to think about, how infrastructure has to change to accommodate and adapt to autonomy? So, how would you answer that?
Yeah, I can think of 24 reasons, but simplifying just some top priorities. What we work on a lot. Well, let me back up a little bit. A lot of the things that we are creating right now are really based on client demand. There are enough cities out there that are already starting to work on planning for autonomous vehicles and doing some level of testing and trials, or starting to look at their master plans and their infrastructure plans to start accommodating for autonomous vehicles. So there's already plenty of work to do, and there's already demand. So that's one element of it. Another one is is when I say autonomous vehicle or autonomous mobility or automated mobility, it's kind of full spectrum. It could be sidewalk robots delivering dinner, or it could be long haul heavy trucks, or mining operations, or autonomy at airports, moving luggage or people. So we're really working on that full spectrum. We're also working on drones and UAVs. So that's another one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But people forget that autonomy is very much applies to third dimensional mobility. And when we say AVs, we think of driverless cars.
Yeah.
But the third dimensional and what happens in space and up over our heads is just as important.
Yeah, and it's already happening. And things like delivery vehicles, small low speed delivery vehicles, they're being deployed, especially on campuses. So it's here. And then the other one is, I'll just hit a few top tier ones. My other one I think is really important is it is coming. It's inevitable. Our future is autonomous. So we need to get started on it. The life cycle of vehicles is, could be 10 to 15 years, depending on if they're what their use case is, and if they're municipal or transit or industrial. And we need legislation to help enable it. We need infrastructure in some area, some level, whether it's digital or physical infrastructure. We need proper planning. So it all just takes time, and the time has already come. So that's why we're doing it.
Have you gotten involved at all with a lot of the big AV groups like Waymo, Cruise, et cetera, got together, I guess about a couple of years ago now, to set up help me, what's it called, the kind of lobbying group that or lobbying or the group that is designed to kind of inform the public about autonomy, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Like PAVE.
Sorry, that's it. Sorry, I was having a senior moment. PAVE,
yeah. We have with a few. I mean, we're really tight with a lot of the planning organizations. We're tight with ITS America. The one that we just joined that I'm pretty excited about is called the AVA, Autonomous Vehicle Alliance. Right. And this was started in Detroit probably about 5 years ago with some of the Detroit OEMs and tier one suppliers, but also some unique ones like Dow is part of the AVA. So yes, we have joined quite a few consortiums. We are working with we're supporting, and that we're on the team to help develop ISO standards for safety and operations and best practices for sidewalk delivery robots. So we're really, trying to, what we did, I believe, is that we built a team of, we kind of hand selected folks that I thought were world leaders in the space. And I hope that we're continuing to be global thought leaders in autonomous deployment. That's the goal, that's the intent. So we are in a number of those, and the list is growing.
Well, I certainly commend you on how you've been growing your team, because we were, of course, delighted to see several good CoMotion friends join your team. So that's really good. Tell us, speaking of CoMotion friends, we're also very happy to see that you very recently forged an agreement with Swiftmile and our friend Colin Roach. Can you talk about that, what the implications of that are, and what that?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I mean, I love this concept, first of all, but it doesn't seem to be obvious when we're talking about autonomous vehicles. And then why did our autonomous vehicle group form this strategic partnership, the relationship? And there's two elements. One is we are deploying our consulting services through Stantec Smart Mobility Group. And our Smart Mobility Group encompasses pretty much everything that's smart mobility. And that includes microtransit. And so it's aligned there. But what I was also really interested and intrigued about with Swiftmile's product is how it can enable autonomous vehicles. Is that we talked to them about, one is that they can accommodate a charging station for sidewalk delivery robots. So right now we're starting to integrate autonomy, but it also could be a communications hotspot with the relationship with Verizon. And it could provide that kind of 5G, and so it could be a communications portal. It could be a source for ground truthing. And then we were also talking with one of the LiDAR companies that's working on infrastructure, potentially infrastructure deployments of could we install a LiDAR as kind of a base station LiDAR, which would be really interesting mid-block, because typically cameras are set up as intersections, but what could we use this mid-block sensor for? And there's all kinds of safety implications, especially when we're also talking about micromobility, and you can provide some data, mid-block data for autonomous vehicles, whether they're sidewalk or on street mixed traffic. But it also would be really interesting because we saw some simple stats, and I'm not an expert in this, but I'm intrigued by it because I love to ride electric scooters. Every time I go to a city, I'm on an electric scooter. But apparently, most of the accidents of electric scooters are fairly close to where they pick them up, because most people that have accidents don't know how to ride them, and they crash pretty early. So just to kind of validate that and then see if there's other circumstances about why there's accidents, I think is pretty interesting. Of course, that's a little beyond autonomous vehicles, but it can also be applied to operations of autonomous vehicles in the future.
Yeah. You're just going back to what you were saying about sort of mid-block sensors, et cetera, on these charging stations. Where do you see going forward the role of V2I in the whole vehicle to infrastructure, in the whole sort of rollout of autonomous mobility?
Yeah.
How important will it be?
I think it's critical. I think it's a have to.
Yeah.
It's a fairly short discussion with me. It's just, why not? Why wouldn't you? I mean, everything's connected. The autonomous vehicles have to be connected anyway to their fleet management system, their remote supervision. Yeah. And I don't know of any autonomous vehicle development company or operator that doesn't want to be connected. Some of them will make the claim that they don't need to be connected, but I believe most of them agree that it adds an extra layer of safety, and they would prefer to be connected. In that full V2X methodology that you mentioned.
Right. What about for you, what is the in the sort of value chain of autonomy, what is exciting you in maybe more in the medium term, not in the long term, but where will margins be realized? Where will the profits be, and for whom, going in the next 2-3 years, for example?
Yeah, I think it's in the unsexy things that don't really get into the media.
Yeah.
So it's more of the logistics applications, things that are relatively boring and repetitive. So cargo movement, logistics movement, low speed delivery, but even things at airports. Like the airports have some challenges with like perimeter security and inspection.
Right.
That's sort of long, boring routes. But they also have to do taxiway and runway inspections frequently. They have to look for, forward object debris, basically screws and nuts and bolts that might be on the runway that could be ingested into a jet engine. All of those are perfect for robots. And that's where I kind of get excited when it's more utility-based robotics, because it's all going to happen, but those are likely to happen first, and those could inform the things that are more complicated and they have that, longer development cycle.
Yeah,
at least that's what we believed in the military, and that's what we were working on.
Right. And then things like small drones for inventory control and warehouses. I mean, that's a quite exciting space. It's How do you see, and is this an issue for you? This sort of growing, geopolitical divide between China and the United States and Europe. China is sort of forging its own path to autonomy in some ways. It's somewhat different from that here. Is that of concern? How do you see that playing out? It's something we look at
it's not
more and more in mobility, whether it's electrification, hydrogen, et cetera. There seem to be kind of conflicting paths, diverging paths.
Yeah, I think because I have more of an operator mindset of just kind of go. Yeah. I know that China's doing amazing things, and they're applying a lot of money to their development and a lot of speed. So it's impressive, but there's still a lot of collaboration. I was actually working with it was a U.S. based company, but its parent company was Chinese in Michigan, and they were working on autonomous vehicles, but it was very collaborative. And then I know of a couple other organizations that have joint projects and collaborations between Chinese companies, basically OEMs or tech companies, and again, Silicon Valley companies. So I hope it's not too much of an issue. I hope that we can collaborate more and more. I just don't know. I'm not that plugged into the political environment. I'm impressed with what they're doing, but all over the world, there's a lot going on. I mean, China, Japan, I think the U.S. is really strong, all in development, and Europe and the U.K. They're doing great as well.
No, the U.K. is pulling ahead in many ways. Israel, of course.
Yeah, Israel. I mean, any technology is. There's some amazing things going on in Israel. Yeah.
What are some of the recent, more cutting edge technologies in your space are exciting you? I mean, I got a briefing recently about, I forget the name of the company. I think it's in Boston, which is doing LiDAR in a chip. It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
And you just think, wow, what a future we're going to have.
Yeah, I remember seeing this probably 8 years ago, solid state LiDAR the size of a postage stamp. And I thought that was amazing. But things that are exciting me, there's some really interesting, there's always this great development. I'm always excited by vehicles. I spent a couple of years at Local Motors and helped them with their autonomous vehicle development. And that was really fun to be in there making something, and especially just their vision of innovation and Jay Rogers' leadership was really cool. And it was a lot of fun to be there and help kick that off. Yeah, so that was neat. So there's a new company. It's a startup. They're not out of stealth yet, but they have got unbelievable technology in their propulsion system, electric propulsion system. Probably can't say any more than that, but it's really cool, and it's going to be a game changer. And
wow.
Let me see. I probably can't say anything else on that, but that's really neat. I'm also more and more marine applications, whether it's a ferry or, some type of a industrial application on the water that uses autonomy. I think I'm more and more intrigued and interested because I've been in the ground vehicle side for 11, 12 years now. And before that, I was in automotive, here in the Detroit area. But my background, I was in the Marine Corps for 10 years and I was in aviation. So anything that flies, I think, is pretty exciting as well. So just the idea of drones zipping over and dropping off my little Amazon package, that was exciting.
Yeah.
Well. And then eventually passenger-based drones, that's pretty wild stuff.
It's wild, but a lot of cities are looking at it seriously. A lot of people are looking at it, and it's coming, definitely down the pike.
You know what, as I think about that even more, what does excite me though about the transportation is that full door-to-door cycle of autonomy. Is that, an autonomous vehicle can pick me up on my schedule, take me to a regional airport where I potentially take an electric drone to, another regional airport. And as I'm landing, the autonomous vehicle is pulling up. Having that entire coordinated system, I hope that happens in my lifetime. I think it'll be close, I'm in my 50s now, so we've got we've got maybe 40 years to get there. It's possible.
But Corey, I wanted to pick up on something you said a little earlier because about maritime transportation and maritime mobility, because that's a field that at CoMotion and also New Cities Foundation, we never really looked at that closely. We're very focused on the urban part of mobility. But I think it's partially thanks to our increasing efforts on the ground in Miami-Dade County in South Florida with CoMotion Miami, that we're starting to look at it really closely. And it's much of our focus is looking at the sort of decarbonization of marine mobility, which has to happen. In my view, it's going to be the next big challenge. We just have to decarbonize, tankers and pleasure craft and also ferries and things like that. But, the autonomy part of that discussion is very important. And, we see more and more startups, sort of companies starting to devote their attention to this field. what happens on the water is going to be very, very important. And the autonomous part of that's really interesting. I mean, just, I must be seeing 1 or 2 companies a week who are in that space. It's
Yeah,
pretty cool.
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It's really interesting. And I hope we get to start working on some projects. We've talked to a couple entities, whether it's municipalities or operations companies, about potentially helping them. Basically applying our general autonomous vehicle experience to a maritime application. Because I mean, the technology is relatively the same, and we're really good at putting the plan together. And but that also includes we've got some amazing partners in like risk analysis for ODDs, and the ODDs over water or docks or ports. It all applies, and I think it's really fascinating. We've got great safety verification systems and people on the team, so all of that I think applies.
Well, you're certainly in the heart of one of the most exciting fields out there. So really commend you. Corey, thanks a lot for taking the time to tell us about GenerationAV. I mean, I wish you best of luck. I mean, you're at the beginning of this journey with Stantec. It's an important one, and really look forward to staying in touch with you.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me. And I think this is what you're doing is extremely important. I mean, I've been a fan of CoMotion since you started it, and a fan of your vision. So thank you, one, for allowing us to participate, be a member, and then do things like this where we can kind of share our stories and hopefully educate folks.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Corey. Listen, have a good weekend, and we'll be in touch, I'm sure, very soon.
All right. Thank you.
Take care, man. Bye-bye.